LSU and Alabama, the week is finally here. You know, it's interesting. Even though when you thought that Nick Saban and a game with LSU versus Nick Saban was going to be different when he left, it kind of somewhat isn't, because the playoff ramifications are still there. The intensity of this game is still there for LSU and Alabama. It's not like Nick Saban's not going to be at the game. Man, it's not just going to coach, but he's going to be there during game day. He's going to be on the, at least what Brian Kelly said today, he's going to be talking to Nick. We're not going to let him in the building, but, you know, you still have an office at Alabama, so we're going to keep you at arm's length. I don't think Nick Saban would divulge any information either way. But if I would have told you in the beginning of the season that LSU versus Alabama was going to come down to a playoff spot yet again, or massive ramifications in the SEC yet again, probably wouldn't have surprised you. And yet here we are, and you can label it whatever you want. What is going to be a playoff eliminator more than likely. So everything that you're going to learn about your team this week, everything that you're going to learn about Brian Kelly this week, everything you're going to learn about the culture, the players, the dynamic of where you're at stands upon the shoulders of this game this weekend, Saturday night in Death Valley. Blake, there's a hurricane coming. I don't care. It ain't going to come here. We're playing this game at night in Death Valley. It all comes down to this. Now, let's talk about Alabama, and let's talk about LSU. Let's talk about what this game looks like here and the big storylines on the field that have to be answered. Guys, you have to, if you're LSU. We've talked about some of these things because we were in a bye week, and we already previewed a little about Alabama. So some of these, me and you have already discussed. But now we get to go into a deeper dive and discuss them a little bit more. Can LSU run the football? Can they run the football? It's the number one question. Because when I look at Alabama up front, when I look at their front seven, when I look at the things that they do schematically, guys, I feel like you're going to be able to run the ball on them. They're 64th in the country in run defense. And it's not the same Alabama that you would think it is. They got some guys. They got some players. They also get leaky in the running game. Technically, you've been better than them in the running game defensively. Not asking for you to be like those years where we had stable of running backs at LSU and you could just go to any one of them and one of those guys can break off 100, 150. I'm not asking to have a performance like Darius Geis or Leonard Fournette or Kevin Falk. Guys, you should be. Regardless of how bad you have been running the football, this is not the best defensive line that you have faced by a long shot. They're not better than what you saw the last time you played against A&M. They're not like that O-line at D-line, at Ole Miss. Guys, they're not South Carolina. No way. They are not South Carolina. They have let teams run on them. And it's an area of weakness for you. So the number one thing for me is this. Besides the fact of what we're going to talk about this week with Garrett Nussmeier needing to extend plays with his legs because of schematical issues that Alabama has and what they want to do, what are you going to look like in the running game? Now, we're going to talk about what Brian Kelly said this week, and it was interesting because last week there were some rumblings coming out, and we talked about this on Wednesday and Thursday. I don't know if schematically LSU completely tries to do the same exact thing that they have been doing in the running game. What have they fixed and changed the bye week, which is going to be interesting because Brian Kelly, in not so many subtle terms, confirmed are something that we talked about on Wednesday and Thursday. That had just some simple rumblings. The bottom line here for that I want to find out, on second and 7, can you pick up 5 yards? That's all I'm asking. Being around 4.5 to 5 yards a carry. You do that, I'm going to feel comfortable where you are. Again, we have to process our minds and brains around the simple nature that this is not the same Alabama up front. They got some good players. Schematically, they've been put in some very tough situations. Very tough. You know, I went back and watched the Tennessee game yesterday and parts of it again today and what Tennessee did in the running game. Guys, they beat them up in the running game all night long. Now, they had really good running back play by Dylan Sampson, which, quite honestly, sprung them in the second half, which you're going to need to find from Caden Durham and Josh Williams. And by God, you got to find a way for Caleb Jackson to have his Arkansas game again. But it's not like that you have not been able to run the football against a top 15 team against the run. You go, what? That's interesting here. UCLA is 11th in the country in run defense, and you ran for 150 yards. All I'm asking for you to do, I need you to go for 5 yards a carry, 4 yards a carry, and maintain it. You know, LSU is 130th in the country in run efficiency rate. Guys, they're dead last. They don't line up and run the ball hardly at all. They're 130th in attempted runs. 130th. So a part of this is, too, that you don't want to run the ball at all, even when you get no gain. But the likelihood that that's going to happen is not that likely. Not every time. Not if you split it more down the middle. Garrett's got to get help. Okay. Well, you're 130th in run calls this year. And you should be able to line up and do it against them. If you got to go in the pistol and hand it off to Caleb Jackson and see if he's going to get you 5 yards, you got to do it. You got to get the tough 3, 4, 5 yards. Your running back room has got to find themselves this week. Because I'm telling you, if you cannot line up and run on Bama, man, guys, this they're 64th in the country. To give you an idea of how bad at times that Bama has been in the run game, it's pretty simple to me. They're 64th in the country in run defense, and you're 48th, and you know how bad that you've been in the run game. Defensively. Does that tell you something? So, if there's a number one thing that I got to see, here's how I'd phrase it. I think you're going to be able to run on them. I personally, deep down, I think that, look, I think you're going to be able to line up and run the football more than what we're expecting. What I don't think is going to happen is that you're going to do it enough. If you can't run the ball on them, man, it's pretty piss poor. O-line, you got to look yourself in the mirror, man. Receivers, tight ends, running backs, quarterback, you got to look yourself in the mirror. Because I don't know if you're a physical football team. I don't. I legitimately don't. But if you let a team that's been very bad at moments at giving up explosive plays in the run game, you're going to be embarrassed. It's going to be interesting. You know, there's another big storyline in this one, and I think it's been pretty common. You know, everybody the last 2 weeks has been bringing up, how does LSU stop Jalen Milroe from running the football? And I agree. Guys, at this point, it's been a little bit nauseating to be – that is the big point. We're with you. It's coming off the Marcel Reed thing. I'm with you. If they stop it, that means they fix it. If they can't, it's just another game where they're not able to adjust and they're not able to figure some things out. There is one thing I think that you're going to be able to do on Alabama when I look at them. Guys, they're 86th in the country in sacks. 82nd at allowing sacks. And they have a quarterback that wants to move. Their offensive line, physically, they have been fine. They have been easily confused multiple times this season. Vandy, second half against Georgia, South Carolina. Wait, South Carolina had 5 sacks on them in the first half. Oh, and by the way, just throwing this out there, Tennessee. Alabama is going to make mistakes. They're going to get penalties. It's who they are. It's in their DNA. If they don't do it against you, either number one, the SEC is cheating you, or number two, something miraculous happened that they're not putting themselves in bad situations. But Brian Kelly was right today when he said this. We got to be really good at tackling on first down. You damn right you better. And you better figure out how you're going to stop a running quarterback, because one thing's for sure, they're going to stop, or they're going to try to run Jalen Milroe and see how you defend it. But the big thing in this too, and why it's so critical to, in my opinion, to not only stop Jalen Milroe, but to be really good defensively against this running game, is because they have a bad propensity of allowing sacks. It happened last year. It's happening a little bit as the same rate as it did a year ago. Guys, did you know that they were 60th in the country at this point last time at allowing sacks? Now you look at them from a statistical analysis standpoint, from a pass rush standpoint, they've gotten worse. Braden Swinson versus Elijah Pritchett, the right tackle. You're going to have to move Braden Swinson over there. It's a massive mismatch for Braden Swinson. So as much as it is a big deal that you need to stop Milroe on these run attempts, I'm with you. It is. It's a massive deal. You let him run all over you a year ago. But the bottom line remains, and I mean, like, legitimately remains, if you can stop that, and I'm not even saying stop it, if you can limit it, if you can contain it, and you get him in the third down situations that he needs to throw the football, guys, you can get after him. Because I think Blake Baker can send things that are exotic enough to confuse that offensive line that can get after Jalen Milroe. Now, that little I formation, defensive formation you ran against A&M, throw that formation in the garbage. Please don't do that again. But it's interesting. How does Brian Kelly and Blake Baker and Bo Davis and Kevin Peoples, after getting exposed last week, guys, you got exposed, or 2 weeks ago, you got exposed. Let's call it what it is. How do they react to it? How much of a big emphasis is it? Brian Kelly mentioned today that, you know what we've been working on? This is we've only been working on 3 areas this week, which hopefully doesn't come back to bite you, but we've been working on 3 areas this week. Number 1, how do we not turn the ball over, which we're going to get to in a minute. Of course we are. But then number 2, how do we stop a quarterback from running all over us? And then number 3, and the biggest thing, is how can we run the football? Yeah, you better have been working on it. You better have been working on it. It's the 2 biggest things. Number 3, speaking of turnovers, please, dear Lord, I hope Garrett doesn't force things this week and throw picks. You're allowed 1. I mean, it's in our DNA as a team right now. We're going to throw picks. Guys, they cannot cover all 5 of the guys that's going to rotate in for you at receiver. They can't. Georgia in the second half threw all over them, and they do not have the receiving core that you do. The common denominator here, ironically, is that Carson Beck and Gary Nussmeier have a lot in common. A lot in common. Big arm, make NFL throws. They have games with 3+ turnover or 2+ turnovers. You gotta limit them, though, man. you had speaking of Georgia, so I think this is somewhat relative. Want to know how big turnovers are? Guys, Florida, with a quarterback from Yale that was a walk-on, it was a 7-point game with 3 minutes left to go because Carson Beck continued to turn the ball over. You let teams, regardless of how bad they are, stay around with you. Take the sack, throw the ball away, force the punt. Here's why it's bigger this week than in normal times. Why it's even bigger this week, I should say, because it's not like it's not a big thing on the agenda. Guys, Alabama might have an issue on special teams because Cole Adams, their return man on punt and kick return, is out for the year. How do they fill punts? How do they fill kickoffs? So if you don't convert on the third down and you punt, and in Death Valley, where things are going to be very tense, do they have somebody back there that can fill punts? Now, if you listen to Kalen DeBoer's press conference today, boy, did he feel a little skittish about what he has going on at punt return. He talked about how Cole Adams was our most reliable guy back there, and we're going to rotate some guys in and, back there just in case. Like, guys, it's LSU year one all over again. Legitimately. If you can get your own turnover or great field position because they don't have a punt return game, take the win. And look, it may be a positive in the return game, but it doesn't – like they could have found something. Like Cole Adams getting hurt, they find somebody breaks off a long punt return, who knows? But the bottom line is, guys, you're not punting the football because you're turning the ball over so much. Field position, time of possession – not having turnovers still wins you football games. Fundamentals of football still win you more football games than they don't. The biggest lie in college football right now is that the big fundamental things are the things that, this guy, their offense does this, their defense does that. No, well, what happened? Well, one team turned the ball over, the other didn't. Or one had the ball longer than the other team and dominated throughout the entire game. Or they have turnovers like what Georgia did last week and why kept that Florida game so close. I think that you might have a little bit of advantage on special teams. And it's tough saying that because last week you looked like ass, or 2 weeks ago you looked like complete ass against A&M. Punt the ball to them and see what happens. That's all I ask. Don't turn the ball over. Guys, if you have one or less turnover in this game, you're going to win. You're going to win. If you play clean-ish football, you're going to win the game. But I have no faith that you can do it. Zero faith that you can do it and accomplish it. One thing I do feel confident in is that you are a team coming off of a loss. So how have you refocused? Brian Kelly teams have been able to refocus a lot of times. But a big thing still remains for me is that if you cannot stop turning the ball over, you're going to lose one of these next 4 football games. Now, not even really thinking about it, it was dawned upon me or brought upon me, and a shame for me to, number one, admit this, but number two, not even realize this. Guys, if you win out, you're in the SEC championship game because you would have a win over Alabama. Georgia doesn't. If A&M wins out, will just be a rematch between the both of you. And if Texas winds up being A&M at the end of the year, you only have one conference loss. The fact remains that you're going to get clipped if you keep turning the ball over the way that you are. Every statistical defensive stat kind of gets thrown out the window for me sometimes, like scoring defense. Guys, you know that from a 100-yard standpoint, LSU is top 25 in not allowing points defensively. Do you know that they're 15th in the SEC in starting field position defensively? Now, a lot of that's got to do with Texas A&M and turning the ball over, but you get my point. I think you might have an advantage in special teams. We'll see. We talked about this a little bit briefly earlier, but I want to emphasize it a little bit more now. I think that your wide receiver room as a whole is actually not that bad. Not right now. The problem that I think that you're having is that you're forcing the ball a little bit too much to one guy, that being Kyron. But C.J. Daniels, Mason Taylor, Aaron Anderson, and now Chris Hilton coming back into the fold. Those guys have got to receive half of your passing attempts. Brian Kelly even mentioned this today. I'm glad that he did, because if he didn't, I'd be a little bit worried. He's like, look, man, we got to distribute the ball a little bit better to other people. You're right, you do. You 1,000% do. Because Kyron Lacy has 618 receiving yards on the year, and Aaron Anderson has 614. One guy has double the targets. Now, you could say, well, Blake, wide receiver one should have double the targets. But Aaron Anderson has half less of the targets and has almost the same production. If you're going to go full air raid, you got to play percentages. So number one rule in a Mike Leach offense, you got to go to the percentage that's working. That's why the air raid is invented, and was invented by two guys who has law degrees, and Hal Mummy and Mike Leach. Play the percentages. It's money ball without it being with. If you run it effectively with great athletes, LSU 19, it's not really money ball. It's money ball on steroids. I don't know if Bama has faced a passing attack like yours, even with the interceptions that you have in there. I don't think that they have faced the athletes in reference to the caliber of athlete that has a quarterback that can get them the football consistently enough. Now, Garrett makes some bad decisions, and we all know that he makes bad decisions, which can be a plus for Alabama secondary. But I think you can win there, and I think you can win there a lot. But the bottom line remains for me, too, here. If you're not getting number one, the football, if you're not getting 8-6 the football, if you're not getting 4 and 3 the football, and even 0, if you limit them and you limit their touches like you did against A&M, you're going to have issues. You're going to have issues. There is no reason that Aaron Anderson should have 3 catches and over 100 yards and a touchdown, and he gets 5 targets. What are we doing? What are we doing? When you run the air raid, you got to be efficient. And if you're not efficient, you're going to get exposed. Run game or no run game. If you're going to throw, guys, you're 130th in run efficiency. Then either you can't run or you don't want to run. The bottom line still remains. Well, then if it's first down, you got to run a quick hitter and get 6 yards. Teams have not. There have been teams that have had the inability to run the football. You're not the first. But there's only one way to go. By the way, you got to call the run game a little bit more. Other than that, if Aaron Anderson's going to give you 8 yards on a small stick route, you got to throw him the football. It's as simple as that. You got to throw C.J. Daniels and Chris Hilton the football. Got to throw Mason Taylor the football. By the way, he's got to get more than 3 targets a game. Not saying not get Kyron Lacy the touches in the football. What I'm saying is, even if I cut out half of them, if I say Kyron Lacy just gets half of them, that would be a surplus of what's going on right now and what LSU's trying to do. A surplus. You can't. You got to stop being so predictable. Look, I think it would even help Kyron. It would help get people off of him and people will back off of him. They're not going to put. He's too physical for you to play bump and run on him too long all game. It's not going to happen. By the way, which leads into my kind of semi-last point here. Guys, unless something changes, which it can change, Alabama can 1,000% change in this. But they want to play off man-to-man coverage. Tennessee had so much success. Vandy had so much success doing one simple thing in the pass game, throwing a slant pattern over and over and over again. And Bama didn't have an answer. So if they're going to play what they've been doing all year, if they're going to play man coverage, you got to pick them apart. You got to run slants, drags, screens. And you know what another big thing that you got to do is that when your quarterback has running lanes, he's got to go get you a first down. Think about this stat. Now, our good buddy Josh Pate's going to be here this weekend. We need to get him a good food list. Think he needs to go to Pyran's or Ruffino's? Of course, Ruffino's, you know, the Paisans. So is Pyran's. I counted 12 times in 4 games where the quarterback for the opposing team against Alabama on a critical third down ran for a first down because Bama was in man-to-man coverage and their D-base had their backs to the quarterback. They stepped up in the pocket and they ran for first downs. Guys, if you do that 4 times, you are going to make them have to adjust. Nico did it 3 times. USF did it 4 times. Vanderbilt did it 4 times. So that'd be 13. So my math is off. But 4 Vandy, 4 Tennessee, and 3 against South Florida. Garrett's got to put his head down and get moving. Got to get moving. Bama has not adjusted. They're going to revert back to playing man-to-man coverage. They're going to give you 2 high looks. So you're going to have to dump the ball off. And if you're not going to run the football, even Josh Williams has got to get touches out of the backfield. Caden Durham's got to get touches out of the backfield. Make them adjust. And then you can start setting some things up. But you got to pick them apart. You never go broke making a profit. And that is what teams have done against Bama to beat them because they just won't adjust. So when I look at Bama, those are the 4.5 big things. There is one more remaining here. From a defensive perspective, you better be ready for everything. There were a couple of plays in the bye week or coming out of a bye week for Alabama earlier in the year with some goofy stuff that they ran. They ran a counter run pop pass to Kendrick Law. One of the most beautifully designed plays by Kalen DeBoer that I'd seen in a while. Went for 20 on 3rd and 1. They went under center and ran a quarterback sweep with Jalen Milroe to the opposite strong side hash. Got a first down. Actually went for 17 yards. They ran a reverse counter read and then a ton of veer game, meaning with the quarterback. They're going to run veer, they're going to run power, they're going to run wham, they're going to run counter. And you better be prepared for everything in the running game. Every single thing. If you're not, you're going to lose. Kalen DeBoer is going to come out with something up his sleeve. And what we've seen from them so far, it's normally in the run game. You guys are reverse. The other thing, too, you know what's interesting about Ryan Williams, the 17-year-old wide receiver? He's young, and he's going to be a really good wideout. Going to be so good. Boy, does he hate when DBs are very physical with him.